Starmer, stifled or stuffed? Welcome to Mark and Pete, the show where we look at the news and shake our heads slowly in despair. Yes, this is Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now, here's our first thought.
Political storm. The storm over Starmer is brewing. Misfortune is starting to flood. The political sharks are circling, and they sense the smell of blood.
Yes, don't they?
Yes, it's been yet again another bad week for Sir Keir Starmer. Well, we've already had more revelations over Mandelson documents. At the same time, we've also seen that Morgan McSweeney quits as the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. Mr. P, it seems as though no matter what Sir Keir Starmer does, there seems to be problems on his doorstep. Is there a way in which he can survive as the sharks are starting to circle?
Well, we've been in situations before, Mr. Mark, where a politician in Britain is looking like it's the end of his presidency, might as well be, end of his prime ministership sooner than you would have thought. We've been, in fact, in this position several times just in the past few years. And each time it seems like, well, there's a way out of this. You can simply do X, whatever it might be. But knowing that constitutionally, as in their constitution, not the constitution of the Britain, they're incapable of doing it. They just so fixed in their ideology and in their way of operating that they can't do it. And Starmer is like an extreme version of that. He has a past in very left-wing politics. He's now, I suppose, what you might call a globalist leftist. His sympathies are not really with Britain, but with some sort of ridiculous and yet firmly held belief in the world order and international law and this sort of thing, when really, that's not true, and we're seeing that idea falling apart in real time. But he's fixed to that, and also he's just not. Maybe he's not intelligent. I know he's certainly not very quick on his feet. He doesn't read the room. He has a way of operating. He looks very boring, and I think that's possibly, Mr. Mark, because he has a certain way of operating. I mean, I don't think he's so obviously boring as the previous Prime Minister John Major, but I think in terms of his actual ability to change, he's more insufferably boring. He won't be able to change. So, in answer to your question, no, I see there's nothing that there are things that could be done, but there's nothing that he can do.
Well, as we've seen,
Damning, I know.
he has faced plenty of leadership crisis situations and questions, a prime minister's question time, over not just the state of the nation, but also his leadership. Now, I think that probably we should come down to what is it that's got him to this place. Well, we know that his judgment, it was his call to ultimately appoint former Lord Mandelson. We now know that Lord Mandelson has resigned his position from the House of Lords, but at the end of the day, many people have questioned how on earth that decision could ever have been made, knowing that, of course, Lord Mandelson did have at the time some relationships with, obviously, Jeffrey Epstein. More and more revelations have started to come out to prove those points. So how on earth could Keir Starmer make that mistake? Now, you could sort of, dare I say, as bad as that is, say, well, maybe that was one aberration. But then you have to look at the other things that are on the nation's plate. We've got certainly the problems with the economy. Now, as we already know, that there have been some revelations of what really is the true state of the nation's debt. So that's one issue. One of the things that Labour did say that it was going to do was address the black hole. This was what they perceived at the time as a 22 billion black hole inherited from the Conservatives. Well, believe me, that black hole has got extremely large. It's become an almost infinite universe. So that's a concern in itself on the economy front. So the economy has got worse. Then we come on to the state of education, the state of the health service. We then look at some of the foreign policies. Now, we know that Sir Keir Starmer went to China. This was something that perhaps was criticised, not just by his own Labour backbenchers, but also given criticism from the United States President Donald Trump. So it's all about judgment. Or politics is all about making the right decisions. But here's the other thing. I'm wondering, Mr. Pete, is Sir Keir Starmer in an ironic sort of strength of position because there isn't anybody better to take over? What say
That's a
you?
good. That is a good point. Yeah, I mean, there are people within the Labour Party who'd like to take over, but they're either compromised or they just don't have it. You've got to have at least some sort of um, recognition factor to be in a position where the Labour MPs and other stakeholders within Labour, when they vote for a Leader, will think that you can do it. And there really isn't anyone who is neither compromised or just not known or just doesn't have the ability. So, well, you could say Starmer didn't have the ability, but he at least had the appearance before he became leader of having some level of competence. Um, I don't know, Mr. Malpass, you can correct me on this, but I don't think there's anyone like that. So I think you're right to suggest that strengthens his position. However, it's in such a poor position. It may be that he has to actually resign now. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, has said that Keir Starmer will need to be dragged kicking and screaming from number 10 and ask for help for Labour MPs. She said this in the House of Parliament. She said she asked for their help in bringing him down. It, she wants to put forward a vote of no confidence.
Yes.
Now, that would mean that if enough people in Parliament bring forward a vote of no confidence, the likelihood would be that he would resign. Um, but yeah, kicking and screaming is perhaps where it's at. So yeah, with no one likely to challenge him, at least not in the near term, in the short term, and no one and him not likely to resign, perhaps he will sort of struggle on as a lame duck prime minister, not having able to do it much, despite his huge majority, because the Labour MPs just don't want to support him.
Well,
It's looking to be looking to get worse and worse for Keir Starmer. I think eventually he'll be forced out. But one thing I think we can be pretty sure of, we're not going to get a general election because that would mean that they're not signing their own death, but signing their own death warrant for their careers, because recent polls have shown most of the front bench, most of the leadership of the Labour Party would lose their seats, would no longer be MPs, were there to be a general election. So, yeah, it's looking like he isn't going to get a replacement. Things are bad. There must surely come a point where even someone as averse to integrity as Keir Starmer would resign.
well, now here's the thing, because I've mentioned before the sharks are swimming around.
Yes.
Now, here's some names to conjure with. Angela Rayner. Now, before you,
Well,
before
this
you,
was the compromise candidate I was talking about because of the revelations about her home and not on payment
yes,
of tax.
mm,
Um, she is compromised in that way, although she is the
correct.
one person who has the most personality.
Well, quite. Now, she exactly that. So she perhaps has some skeletons in her closet. Now, here's the other one for you. Ed Miliband. I know that you're inspired. Come on, I know.
Well,
Maybe not.
Ed Miliband was leader of the Labour Party and famously had
Yes.
trouble eating a bacon sandwich, I believe it was, on television. He's like he'd never come across such a proletariat type dish before.
Yes. I know.
He's just
He is
totally
the climate
useless.
loving
Climate change loving
well,
idiot. Yeah, I know.
climate change enthusiast, and you have to say that that, of course, in itself is a very much a controversy over basically moving our energy policy into chaos. But here's one candidate that potentially is seen as a safe pair of hands, not really seen that much in the media, but is actually ironically doing a reasonable job, and that is a Defence Secretary John Healey. Now,
Right.
what's
Yes.
interesting here is that he may not necessarily be seen as a sparkling personality, but maybe what we now need is a safe pair of hands, somebody who can come in, bring a bit of discipline, and actually start to address some of the matters that really Sir Keir Starmer has struggled with. I wonder whether you know of him. I think he has some good credibility. I think with an armed force minister, Al Khan's as well, maybe as a sort of a
Oh.
supporting body there. But either way, I do agree that we're sort of scraping the barrel a little bit here. But in my opinion, and this is the thing that we've talked about over recent weeks, isn't it interesting that almost every week that goes by, Sir Keir Starmer fails to address some of these issues and seems to be culpable on almost all of them. That's the question, which I
Yes.
really question now. How far can he carry on making these
Yes.
calamitous
I think
mistakes?
Healy is another sort of charisma vacuum, isn't he? But going back to Starmer, I think, yeah, it's exactly. Do you know that old phrase? It was used after the Second World War to describe Eichmann. I think it's when it first used the banality of evil. Um, you get real evil done when boring, weak men are leading, and is the what the phrase means, and that's I think what we're seeing. You highlighted the fact that Keir Starmer failed to address issues. His weak leadership means effectively evil occurring in that it's destroying the country uh,
Yes,
economically, culturally. Bring you know about the weakness over the bringing in many migrants who are culturally different. Um, the not the kowtowing, as people put it, even though kowtow is, I think, a Japanese term, kowtowing to China, is another example of weakness. And then the not dealing with Mandy, as we call him, Peter Mandelson, and those issues with Jeffrey Epstein. Weakness, 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 but it's still evil. You don't need to be strong to be evil. You can be a boring, weak man and still result in having an evil effect on the country. And that's, I think, what's happening.
well, there are a lot of nostrils flaring, and there's a sense of blood in the air. So, my question to our listeners is Sir Keir Starmer a dead man walking?